The torches came first, flickering points of orange light in the moonless dark, spreading across the prairie like the eyes of wolves closing in on wounded prey. Caleb Thornton counted them from the porch of his cabin. 10, maybe 12. More than enough to do what they came to do. Blood ran down his left arm in a slow, warm trickle. Someone had fired from the darkness as they approached, and the bullet had found the meat of his shoulder. Not deep enough to stop him, not shallow enough to ignore. He pressed his right hand against the wound for a moment, felt the wet heat seeping through his fingers, then let go and gripped his rifle tighter. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. He did not turn around. He did not need to. He knew who stood there. He knew the sound of her breathing, the way it caught in her throat when fear tried to take hold. He had learned these things over 5 days. 5 days that felt like 5 years. "How many?" Kaya asked. Her voice was steadier than he expected. "Enough." The torches drew closer. Now he could see the men carrying them, shadows given form and purpose. At the front of the pack, mounted on a black horse that gleamed like polished obsidian, sat Samuel Redford. Even in the darkness, Caleb could make out the man's rigid posture, the way he held his head like a king surveying his domain. In his hand, a coil of new rope caught the torchlight. Samuel stopped his horse 30 yards from the cabin. The others fanned out behind him, forming a half-circle of fire and iron. "Thornton." Samuel's voice carried across the distance without effort. A voice accustomed to being heard, accustomed to being obeyed. "You have something that belongs to me." Caleb said nothing. "Hand over the girl," Samuel continued, "and maybe I will let you die quick." Kaya stepped forward, coming to stand beside Caleb on the porch. He wanted to tell her to get back inside to hide, to find the back window and run into the night, but he knew she would not listen. He had learned that about her too. She held a pistol in her right hand. It was the Colt he had given her that morning after teaching her how to load it, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger without flinching. Her hand trembled, but she did not drop the weapon. She did not retreat. "If someone has to die tonight," she said loud enough for Samuel to hear, "it will not be him." Samuel laughed. The sound was cold, empty, the laugh of a man who had stopped feeling anything real a long time ago. "You think you can threaten me, girl, you who I raised from nothing, you who would be dead in a ditch somewhere if I had not taken you in." "You did not take me in." Kaya's voice hardened. "You took my mother, and when she died you kept me like livestock. Watch your tongue, or what you will hang me from another tree." Silence fell over the gathering. Even the horses seemed to hold their breath. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, the sound thin and mournful in the vast emptiness of the prairie. Caleb raised his rifle, the barrel steady despite the pain burning through his shoulder. "You heard her, Redford. She is not going anywhere. You are a fool old man, a fool who stuck his nose where it did not belong." Samuel gestured to the men behind him. "Do you know who these people are? Shopkeepers, farmers, men who owe me money, men whose families depend on my good graces. They will do whatever I tell them to do, and tonight I am telling them to burn that cabin to the ground with you inside it. Then you will have to look her in the eye while you do it." Samuel spurred his horse forward a few steps, close enough now that Caleb could see his face clearly in the torchlight. The square jaw, the neatly trimmed beard, the pale gray eyes that held no warmth, no mercy, no trace of human compassion. "You do not understand what you have done," Samuel said. "You do not understand what you have cost me." "I understand plenty." "Do you? Do you understand that this girl knows things she should not know? Do you understand that her silence is worth more than your life and mine combined?" Caleb glanced at Kaya. Her jaw was set, her eyes fixed on her stepfather with an intensity that bordered on hatred. But beneath the hatred he saw something else. Fear. Not for herself. For him. "Whatever she knows," Caleb said, "it dies with you tonight. Not with her." Samuel shook his head slowly. "You should have walked away when you had the chance. You should have left her hanging on that tree where you found her, but you did not. And now, he raised his hand. The men behind him raised their weapons. Now you will both pay the price. Caleb tightened his grip on the rifle. Beside him, Kaya drew a shaky breath and lifted her pistol. The torches crackled. The horses stamped. The night held its breath. And then a voice called out from the darkness. "That is enough, Samuel." Marshal Thomas Garrett emerged from the shadows at the edge of the clearing, flanked by 5 armed men. Deputies, townspeople who had heard the truth and chosen to believe it. Their weapons were drawn, their faces grim with purpose. "You are under arrest," the marshal said, "for escaping custody and attempted murder. And you, Judge Crane." For the first time, Caleb noticed the older man sitting on a horse at the edge of Samuel's group. Judge Harlan Crane, 62 years old, the most powerful lawman in the territory, the shadow that had been pulling strings all along. The judge's face betrayed nothing, but his horse took a nervous step backward. "This is not over," Samuel said through clenched teeth. "Yes," Caleb replied. "It is." The rifles spoke. The night exploded into chaos. But to understand how it all began, we need to go back. 5 days earlier, to a hot afternoon on the scorched prairie of New Mexico Territory, to the moment when Caleb Thornton saw something hanging from a dead tree and made a choice that would change everything. This is that story. The sun hung low and mean over the New Mexico prairie, turning the sky the color of old brass and baking the earth until it cracked like dried leather. Heat waves shimmered on the horizon, blurring the line between land and sky until the whole world seemed to melt into a single smear of brown and gold. Caleb Thornton rode his horse along the trail that led back to his cabin, the same trail he had ridden 1,000 times before. His saddlebags were heavy with supplies from Dusty Creek: coffee, salt, flour, ammunition, the essentials of a life lived alone on the edge of nowhere. He was 47 years old. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and his face was weathered from years of sun and wind, the lines around his eyes deep enough to hold shadows. His hands were calloused from work, his shoulders still broad but beginning to bow with the weight of years and memories he could not shake. People in town called him Old Man Thornton, though he was not truly old. They said he was strange, a loner, a man who lived like a ghost on the outskirts of civilization, never causing trouble but never joining in either. They did not know his story. He had never told them. He had not told anyone in the 10 years since he came to this land. Copper. His horse was a chestnut gelding with a white blaze on his forehead and a calm disposition that suited Caleb's temperament. The horse knew the way home without guidance, which was good because Caleb's mind was elsewhere. It was often elsewhere, wandering back through years and miles to a small farmhouse in Kansas, to a woman with golden hair and a boy with his father's gray eyes. Margaret. Daniel. 10 years gone, and still their names cut through him like broken glass. Copper stopped. Caleb snapped back to the present, his hand moving instinctively to the Colt .45 on his hip. The horse's ears were pricked forward, nostrils flaring a low whinny building in his throat. Something was wrong. "Easy, boy." Caleb scanned the landscape ahead, looking for whatever had spooked the animal. At first he saw nothing unusual. The same endless expanse of dry grass and red earth, the same scattered mesquite bushes, the same empty horizon. But then his eyes caught something about 50 yards ahead near the skeleton of a long dead oak tree. Something that did not belong. A shape, dark against the pale wood of the dead tree, moving slightly. Or was it the heat playing tricks? Caleb urged Copper forward, slow and cautious. His hand stayed on his pistol. Out here, caution was the difference between living and dying. As he drew closer, the shape resolved itself into something his mind refused to accept at first. It looked like a body, hanging upside down from a low branch of the dead oak, suspended by a rope wrapped around the ankles. A woman. No, a girl. Caleb kicked Copper into a gallop. She was still alive when he reached her. Barely. The rope had cut deep grooves into her ankles, the flesh raw and bleeding where it bit into skin. Her body hung curved like a bow bent by its own weight after what must have been hours in that position. Her dress a fringed garment of soft leather that marked her as Apache or part Apache had fallen down to expose her waist and hips. Her long black hair hung in two thick braids that nearly touched the ground, matted with dust and blood. But it was the wounds that stopped Caleb's breath in his throat. From her buttocks down to her thighs her skin was a map of violence, long cuts, some still wet with blood, others crusted over and dark. Bruises layered on top of bruises, some faded to a sickly yellow-green, others fresh and purple and angry. This was not the result of a single attack. This was the record of repeated brutality stretching back weeks or months or longer. Caleb dismounted and moved to her quickly, his mind shifting into the cold, practical mode he had learned long ago. Assess the situation. Take action. Do not let emotion cloud judgment. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. Alive. But how much longer would that be true? He stepped around behind her, one hand reaching up to steady her convulsing body while the other pulled his knife from its sheath. He would need to cut the rope carefully, brace himself to catch her when she fell, make sure she did not break her neck hitting the ground. Just as the blade touched the rope, she jerked awake. Her eyes flew open, dark brown, almost black, wide with terror. A sound escaped her lips, half gasp and half whimper. And then words broken and desperate forced out between cracked lips. "It is torn. Please. It hurts so much." Caleb froze. The words hung in the air like an accusation. And in that moment he understood something with terrible clarity. If anyone were to see this scene right now, a grown man standing behind the bound body of a young woman, his hands on her flesh, her voice crying out in pain. There would be no explaining, no defense, no trial. He would be hanged before sundown. But she was dying, and he could not walk away. "Hold on," he said, his voice rough. "I am going to cut you down. It will hurt when you fall. I will try to catch you." She made no response. Her eyes had closed again, her body going limp. Caleb cut the rope. She dropped, and he caught her staggering under the unexpected lightness of her frame. She weighed almost nothing, as if the flesh had been stripped from her bones by months of starvation and suffering. He lowered her to the ground as gently as he could, cradling her head to keep it from striking the hard-packed earth. Her blood soaked into his shirt, warm and wet and real. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and then he heard it. Hoofbeats, coming fast from the direction of town. Caleb looked up and saw a cloud of dust rising on the horizon, multiple riders moving at a gallop. Too far to see clearly, but close enough to matter. Someone had seen. He looked down at the girl in his arms. Unconscious now, broken, bleeding, dying if he did not get her somewhere safe and tend her wounds. He thought about what people would say, what they would believe. A strange man alone on the prairie with a half-naked Apache girl, her body covered in injuries, her voice crying out in distress. He thought about his quiet cabin on the edge of the wilderness, the peace he had built there over 10 years, the anonymity, the safety. And then he thought about another girl a long time ago, a girl he could not save. Caleb made his choice. He lifted the unconscious young woman onto Copper's back, climbed up behind her, and rode hard toward his cabin. Away from the approaching riders, away from the judgment of strangers, toward whatever consequences would follow. Behind him, the dust cloud grew larger. Caleb Thornton's cabin stood alone at the edge of the prairie, where the flat grassland began to give way to the rocky foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It was a simple structure, built of stone and rough-hewn timber, with a sloped roof of wooden shingles and a single chimney that had not seen use in months. He had built it himself 10 years ago, with hands that still remembered how to work and a heart that had forgotten how to feel. Inside it was sparse but clean. A bed against one wall, a table and 2 chairs, a fireplace, a small kitchen area with a cast-iron stove, a few shelves holding books, tools, and supplies, the home of a man who needed very little and wanted even less. Caleb carried the girl inside and laid her on a blanket near the fireplace. She had not regained consciousness during the ride. Her breathing remained shallow, her skin pale beneath its bronze tone. close to death, but not dead yet. He lit a fire more for light than warmth and set a pot of water to boil. Then he gathered what supplies he had: clean cloth torn from an old shirt, a bottle of whiskey for disinfecting, a needle and thread, salve made from aloe and herbs that he kept for treating injuries. Working with careful, methodical movements, he cleaned the wounds on her thighs and buttocks. The work required him to touch her in places propriety forbade, but there was nothing improper in his intent. He had seen wounds before. He had treated them before. Long ago, in another life, when he wore a badge and carried the weight of the law on his shoulders. The wounds were worse than he had first thought. The cuts were deep in places, the edges ragged as if made by a leather strap or belt wielded with tremendous force. Some had already begun to fester, the flesh around them hot and swollen with infection. He cleaned them as best he could, applied the salve, and bandaged them with strips of cloth. Through it all she did not wake. Her body twitched occasionally, small sounds of pain escaping her lips, but she remained lost in whatever dark place her mind had fled to. When he had done all he could, Caleb sat back on his heels and looked at her. Young, 19 or 20, he guessed, a patchy blood visible in her high cheekbones and the shape of her eyes, but mixed with something else. European, perhaps. Her features were too soft, her skin too light to be full blood. A half-breed, they would call her in town. The kind of person who belonged nowhere and was welcome nowhere. What had happened to her? Who had done this? And what the hell was he supposed to do now? Night had fallen by the time she woke. Caleb was sitting in a chair across the room, a cup of water in his hand, his rifle propped against the wall within easy reach. He had not slept. He had barely moved. Just sat there in the growing darkness, watching her breathe, waiting for whatever came next. Her eyes opened slowly, blinked, focused on the unfamiliar ceiling above her, then moved around the room, taking in her surroundings. When they landed on Caleb, fear flashed through them like lightning through a storm cloud. Her body tensed, hands gripping the blanket, pulling it up to her chin. He did not move, did not speak, just sat there, keeping his distance, letting her see that he meant no harm. Slowly, so slowly, the fear in her eyes began to fade, not into trust, not yet, but into something less than terror, a wary assessment, a calculation of threat and safety. "Where am I?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse, scraped raw from dehydration and screaming. "My cabin. About 2 hours' ride from Dusty Creek." "How long?" "Few hours since I found you." She processed this information, her dark eyes never leaving his face. Then she looked down at herself, at the bandages wrapped around her thighs, the blanket covering her body. Understanding dawned. "You treated my wounds." "Yes." "Why?" Caleb shrugged. "You were dying." "That is not a reason." "It is for some people." She stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she let go of the blanket. Her body relaxed fractionally, though her eyes remained watchful. "My name is Kaya." "Caleb Thornton." "Why did you help me, Caleb Thornton?" He thought about the question, thought about all the easy answers he could give, because it was the right thing to do, because he could not leave her to die, because some spark of decency still survived in his hollow chest. But she deserved better than easy answers. "Because I have lost people," he said finally, "and I could not stand to watch someone else die when I had the power to stop it." Kaya studied him with those dark, penetrating eyes, measuring him, weighing him against her experience of men and finding him different from what she expected. "You should not have helped me," she said quietly. "You do not know what you have done." "Then tell me." She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was flat, empty, the voice of someone reciting facts they had long since stopped feeling. "The man who hung me on that tree is Samuel Redford. He is my stepfather. He is also the richest and most powerful man in Dusty Creek." Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew the name. Everyone within 50 miles knew the name. Samuel Redford owned the largest trading post in the territory. He bought and sold Woolhide's livestock. He lent money to farmers and ranchers who had fallen on hard times. He was generous with his charity and ruthless with his debts. And now Caleb had taken something that belonged to him. "He will come for you," Caleb said. "He will come for both of us." Kaya's eyes met his. "And he will not come alone." Samuel Redford arrived at noon the next day. Caleb heard the hoofbeats long before he saw the rider. He stepped onto the porch of his cabin, stood there with his hands at his sides, and waited. The man who approached was exactly what Caleb had expected. Tall, broad-shouldered, running slightly to fat around the middle the way wealthy men often did when they spent more time counting money than working. He wore expensive clothes by frontier standards, a brown vest over a white shirt, clean trousers tucked into polished leather boots. His beard was neatly trimmed, his gray eyes cold and calculating. He stopped his horse a few yards from the fence, making no move to dismount. "She is here." It was not a question. Caleb nodded. "She is hurt badly." Samuel's expression did not change. No surprise, no concern, not even anger really, just a flat, reptilian assessment. "I am her stepfather. I am responsible for her." "So I have heard." "Then you know I am within my rights to take her home." Caleb said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was often more powerful than words. Samuel shifted in his saddle, his eyes moving from Caleb to the cabin door, then back again, looking for something, calculating angles. "How did you find her?" he asked. "Hanging from a tree, upside down, bleeding." "Ah." Samuel nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he already knew. "And what were you doing behind her when you cut her down?" "Catching her." "That is not what it will look like to others." Caleb felt the words like a fist to the gut. There it was, the threat laid bare, the weapon that Samuel would use against him if he refused to cooperate. "People saw you," Samuel continued, his voice smooth as oil on water. "A group of ranchers riding back from the cattle drive. They saw a man standing behind the bound body of a young woman. They heard her crying out. They rode straight to town and told everyone what they witnessed." His smile was cold. "They will draw their own conclusions." "And what conclusions will you help them draw?" Samuel smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "That depends entirely on what happens next." Inside the cabin, Caleb heard movement. Kaya was awake, listening. Through the crack of the door he caught a glimpse of her face. Pale, terrified, but not of him. Of the man sitting on the horse. She met her stepfather's eyes, and Caleb saw her shrink back. A reflexive flinch, the conditioned response of years of abuse. Samuel saw it too. His smile widened fractionally. "She is afraid," he said, "because she knows what she did. She ran away from home. She disobeyed me, and now she is making up stories to cover her shame." Caleb said nothing. "I am a patient man, Thornton. I am giving you a chance to do the right thing. Return the girl to me, and we will say no more about this unfortunate incident. Refuse." He let the word hang in the air. "And I will tell everyone in Dusty Creek that you found her helpless and took advantage of her, that you violated her out there on the prairie while she begged for mercy." "That is a lie." "Is it?" Samuel's gray eyes glittered. "Out here, truth is whatever people choose to believe, and around here people are accustomed to believing me." He gathered his reins, preparing to leave. "Think about my offer, Thornton. Think carefully, because if you refuse I will bury you so deep that no one will remember your name." He turned his horse and rode away without looking back. The dust of his departure hung in the air long after he had vanished from sight. Caleb stood on the porch watching the empty horizon. His hands were steady, but inside something cold and hard was settling into place. The recognition of what was coming. The acceptance of a fight he had not chosen but could not avoid. Behind him the cabin door opened. Kaya stepped out, moving slowly, carefully, her wounds still raw. "He will come back," she said. "I know. And when he does, he will not be alone." Caleb turned to look at her. In the harsh light of the midday sun, she looked fragile, broken. But there was something in her eyes that had not been there before, a spark of something that might have been hope. "Why did you not give me to him?" she asked. "It would have been easier." Caleb thought about the question, thought about Samuel's threats, and the judgment of strangers, and the quiet life he had built here over 10 years. "Because some things are more important than easy," he said, and he went inside to check on his rifle. In Dusty Creek, the story spread faster than a prairie fire. By sundown of that first day, everyone in town had heard some version of it. Samuel Redford, sitting in the center of the Dusty Creek saloon, told it best. He had always been a gifted storyteller. "I was out looking for my stepdaughter," he said, his voice carrying easily over the murmur of the crowd. "You know how she is. Wild, disobedient, the Apache blood in her, I suppose. She runs off sometimes and I have to bring her back." Nods of understanding from the men gathered around. They knew the type, had heard the stories. "I found her near the old Miller property out by that dead oak tree, but I was not the first one there." Samuel paused, letting the silence build. Caleb Thornton had found her first. Whispers rippled through the room. "I do not know exactly what happened before I arrived," Samuel continued, "but I can tell you what I saw. I saw my stepdaughter hanging from a tree by her ankles, half undressed, screaming in pain and terror. And I saw Thornton standing behind her, his hands on her body." More whispers, darker now, angrier. "I confronted him, of course, demanded to know what he was doing. He claimed he was cutting her down, claimed he was helping her." Samuel shook his head sadly. "But she was crying, begging, saying things that—" He let his voice trail off. "Well, I cannot repeat them in polite company." "What did you do?" someone asked. "What could I do?" He had a rifle. I was alone and unarmed. I had no choice but to ride back to town and report what I had seen. "And the girl?" "He took her, threw her on his horse and rode off before I could stop him." Samuel's gray eyes swept over the gathered men, touching each face in turn. "God only knows what he is doing to her right now." The muttering grew louder, hands clenched into fists, eyes hardened with righteous fury. In the corner of the saloon, Bill Hartley sat alone with his whiskey, listening. Bill was a horse trader, 41 years old, and one of the few men in Dusty Creek who had actually spoken with Caleb Thornton more than once. He had sold the man horses over the years, found him quiet but fair, not the type to hurt a woman. But Bill knew better than to speak up. Samuel Redford had long arms and a longer memory. The men who crossed him had a way of disappearing. So Bill sat and drank and said nothing while the mob began to form. At the same time, in a small house on the edge of town, Dr. Henry Wallace was having thoughts of his own. The doctor was 61 years old, thin, gray-haired. He had practiced medicine in Dusty Creek for more than 20 years and had seen just about every kind of wound and illness the frontier could produce. He had also seen his share of abuse. Women with broken bones they claimed came from falls. Children with bruises they could not explain. The walking wounded of domestic violence, too ashamed or too afraid to speak the truth. He had heard Samuel's story, same as everyone else, and something about it did not sit right. The girl had been found hanging by her ankles, Samuel said, screaming in pain, her clothing disturbed. But Henry Wallace had treated Samuel's stepdaughter before. 3 years ago she had come to his office with a broken wrist. 2 years ago, a dislocated shoulder. Each time Samuel had been there explaining how clumsy she was, how prone to accidents. Each time the girl had said nothing, just stared at the floor with those dark, haunted eyes while Samuel did all the talking. The doctor poured himself a whiskey and sat by the window watching the sun set over the prairie. He thought about all the times he had seen injuries he could not explain, all the times he had accepted easy lies because the truth was too hard to face. Maybe it was time to stop accepting. He finished his drink, picked up his medical bag, and headed for the door. Whatever the truth was, he would find it at Caleb Thornton's cabin. Dr. Wallace arrived at the cabin late in the afternoon of the third day. Caleb heard him coming and stepped onto the porch with his rifle ready for trouble. But the man who dismounted and approached the fence was not part of any mob. He was old, thin, carrying a worn leather bag that marked him as a physician. "I am not here to cause problems," the doctor said, raising his hands to show they were empty. "I am here to see the girl." "Why?" "Because I have treated her before, and because something about Samuel's story does not add up." Caleb studied the man for a long moment, weighed the risk against the potential benefit. Finally he stepped aside. "She is inside." The doctor found Kaya lying on the blanket near the fireplace much as Caleb had left her. Her color was better now, her breathing stronger, but she was still weak, still wounded in ways that went far deeper than flesh. Henry Wallace knelt beside her, moving slowly, carefully, the way you would approach a frightened animal. When he reached for the edge of her dress to examine the wounds on her thighs, she flinched. "Easy," he said softly. "I just want to look. I will not hurt you." She did not resist, but her hands gripped the edge of the blanket so tightly that her knuckles went white. What the doctor found confirmed his suspicions. The wounds were not clean or straight or consistent with a single incident. They were layered, overlapping, the product of repeated violence over an extended period. Weeks, months, maybe years. He sat back on his heels and looked at Caleb. "These wounds were not caused by you," he said. "They are too old, too varied. This girl has been beaten systematically, probably for a very long time." Caleb nodded. "I know." "Will you testify to that?" Kaya asked, her voice small. The doctor hesitated. He thought about Samuel Redford, about the power the man wielded in this territory, about what it would cost him to speak the truth. Then he thought about all the times he had stayed silent, all the victims he had failed by keeping his mouth shut. "Yes," he said finally, "I will testify." Relief flooded Kaya's face. For the first time since Caleb had found her, something like hope flickered in her dark eyes. But the hope was short-lived. "There is something you should know," the doctor said as he packed his bag. "Samuel is gathering men. He is telling everyone that you violated this girl, that you kidnapped her. They are talking about coming out here tonight." Caleb's jaw tightened. "How many? 10, maybe 15. Most of them owe Samuel money or favors. They will do what he tells them." "And the law?" "Marshal Garrett is out of town, will not be back for 2 days at least." The doctor stood, his old joints creaking. "You are on your own, Mr. Thornton, at least until I can spread the truth." "Then spread it fast." The doctor nodded and headed for the door, but before he left he turned back. "I do not know why you helped her," he said. "Most men would have looked the other way, but whatever your reasons, you did a good thing, maybe the first good thing that has happened to this girl in a long time." Then he was gone, riding back toward town as the shadows lengthened across the prairie. Caleb watched him go, then looked at Kaya. She was sitting up now, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. "He will come tonight," she said. "I know. And you are still not going to give me up?" "No." She turned to look at him then, really look at him in a way she had not before, seeing him, measuring him against every other man she had ever known. "Why?" she asked. "What is it to you I am nobody, a half-breed girl who belongs nowhere and matters to no one? Why would you risk your life for me?" Caleb thought about the question, thought about Margaret and Daniel dead in the ground in Kansas, thought about the 10 years he had spent hiding from the world, waiting for death to find him. "Because some things matter more than risk," he said. "And because if I turned my back on you now, I would not be able to live with myself." Kaya was silent for a moment. Then slowly she nodded. "You are a strange man, Caleb Thornton." "So I have been told." Outside the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere in the distance the sound of hoofbeats began to rise. They were coming. They came at nightfall. A dozen men with torches and rifles and a coil of new rope that smelled of hemp and murder. Caleb stood on the porch waiting. He had sent Kaya inside with instructions to hide, but he knew she was watching through the crack of the door. He could feel her eyes on his back. Samuel Redford led the procession, mounted on his black horse like a general leading troops into battle. Behind him rode the men of Dusty Creek, shopkeepers and farmers and ranchers who had never done anything truly wrong in their lives, but who had been convinced through the alchemy of rumor and manipulation that they were here to deliver justice. They stopped in a half-circle around the cabin, their torches casting dancing shadows on the dry earth. "Thornton," Samuel called out, "this is your last chance. Hand over the girl and we will give you a fair trial. There is nothing fair about this and we both know it. Then you leave us no choice." The men began to dismount. The one holding the rope stepped forward, his face grim with purpose. Caleb raised his rifle. "First man to cross that fence line dies." They hesitated. A rifle was a powerful deterrent even against a mob, but Samuel was smarter than that. "Think about what you are doing, Thornton. You are one man. There are a dozen of us. Even if you kill a few, the rest will drag you out of there and string you up like the animal you are. Maybe, but you will be the first to go." Samuel's eyes narrowed. For a moment fear flickered in their gray depths, the fear of a man who had always let others do his dirty work. Then the cabin door opened. Kaya stepped out onto the porch, moving slowly, painfully. She wore the fringed dress she had been wearing when Caleb found her. It was torn and stained with blood. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed, but she stood straight and tall. "I am not going back with you," she said. Samuel's face twisted. "You do not have a choice." "I have been living without choices for 8 years, no more." "You ungrateful little—" "You hung me from a tree." Kaya's voice cut through the night like a knife. "You stripped my clothes and hung me upside down and left me to die. Not because I did anything wrong, because I tried to run away from the monster you are." Silence. Complete and absolute silence, broken only by the crackle of torches and the stamping of nervous horses. "She is lying," Samuel said quickly. "The trauma has confused her. She does not know what she is saying." "I know exactly what I am saying." Kaya stepped forward, standing beside Caleb on the porch. "And I have proof. 8 years of proof written on my body in scars." Some of the men shifted uncomfortably. Doubt crept into their eyes. Then from the back of the group a voice spoke up. "I saw bruises on her once, years ago, when she came to my store." Edgar Finch, the feed store owner, a quiet man who kept to himself. "So did I," said another voice, and another. The doubt spread like ripples in a pond. Samuel's face went red, then white. "You are going to believe this lying half-breed over me, over Samuel Redford." But the tide had already begun to turn. From the edge of the clearing a new voice rang out. "Put down your weapons, all of you." Marshal Thomas Garrett rode into the torchlight, flanked by 2 deputies. His face was hard, his badge glinting in the firelight. "I heard about this little gathering," the marshal said. "Rode all night to get back in time." He turned to Samuel. "Mr. Redford, you are going to come with me to answer some questions." "On what charge?" "Let us start with inciting a mob and work our way up from there." Samuel's hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment it looked like he might resist, might try to run, might do something stupid and desperate. But then the fight went out of him. His shoulders sagged, his eyes dropped to the ground. "This is not over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is," Caleb replied. The marshal's deputies moved in to escort Samuel away. The mob dispersed, the men riding off into the darkness with their torches extinguished and their certainty shaken. And on the porch of the cabin, Caleb Thornton stood beside Kaya and watched them go. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me yet. This is just the beginning." She nodded slowly. "I know. But for the first time in 8 years, I feel like I might survive to see the end." Caleb looked at her, at the strength in her eyes that no amount of abuse had been able to extinguish, at the courage that had allowed her to face her tormentor in front of a mob. "You will survive," he said. "I will make sure of it." And somewhere in his hollow chest, in the place where his heart used to be, something stirred, something that felt almost like hope. Dawn came slowly to the prairie, painting the sky in shades of pale gold, and rose as if the heavens themselves were trying to apologize for the darkness of the night before. Caleb Thornton sat on the porch of his cabin, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the light creep across the land. He had not slept, could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes he saw the torches, heard the voices calling for blood, felt the weight of the rope they had brought to hang him with. But that was over now. Samuel Redford was in the town jail awaiting transfer to Santa Fe for trial. The mob had dispersed, scattered back to their homes and their shame. And Kaya was inside sleeping for the first time in days without screaming herself awake. It should have felt like victory. It did not. Caleb knew men like Samuel Redford. He had spent years hunting them back when he wore a badge and believed in justice. Men like that did not give up. They did not accept defeat. They waited. They planned. They struck when you least expected it. This was not over. Not by a long shot. The cabin door creaked open behind him. Kaya stepped out onto the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the morning chill. Her wounds were healing slowly, but she still moved with the careful gait of someone who had learned that pain was always waiting around the next corner. She sat down on the step beside him, saying nothing. They had learned that about each other over the past few days, that silence between them did not need to be filled, that sometimes just being present was enough. "You did not sleep," she said finally. "Neither did you." "I tried." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Every time I close my eyes I see his face, hear his voice." Caleb nodded. He understood that kind of haunting better than she knew. "It will get easier," he said. "Eventually. The nightmares will come less often. The fear will fade." "You sound like you know from experience." He did not answer, just stared out at the horizon where the sun was now fully risen, burning away the last traces of night. "Will you tell me?" Kaya asked quietly. "What happened to you? Why you live out here alone like you are hiding from the world?" Caleb was silent for a long moment. He had not told this story to anyone, had buried it so deep inside himself that he sometimes forgot it was there. But she had shared her pain with him, her shame, her worst memories. Maybe it was time he did the same. 10 years ago, he began, his voice rough, I was a deputy sheriff in Kansas, had a wife named Margaret and a son named Daniel. He was 7 years old, had his mother's hair and my eyes. Kaya watched him waiting. There was a fever that summer, came through like a wildfire, killing everything in its path. Margaret got sick first, then Daniel. I watched them die one after the other in the span of a week, buried them myself in the cemetery behind the church. His hands tightened around the coffee cup. Even now, after all these years, the memory cut like a knife. After the funerals, I found out that the medicine I had bought for them, the medicine that was supposed to save their lives, was fake. Watered-down alcohol and sugar sold by a traveling doctor who had moved on to the next town before anyone realized what he had done. What did you do? I hunted him down. Took me 3 months, but I found him in a town called Abilene, selling the same poison to other desperate families. Caleb's jaw clenched. I beat him until my hands were bloody and my arms were tired, beat him until he could not stand, could not speak, could not do anything but lie there and beg for mercy. Did you kill him? No. The word came out like a sigh. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But I looked at him lying there broken and bleeding, and I realized that if I finished it, if I took his life, I would be no better than he was. I would have become the very thing I hated. Kaya was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then she said, What happened to him? He died anyway. 2 days later in the hospital. The doctor said I had damaged something inside him that could not be fixed. Caleb shook his head. So I killed him after all. Just took a little longer. And that is why you came here. Why you live alone. I could not stay in Kansas. Too many memories. Too many people who knew what I had done. So I sold everything and came west. Found this place. Built this cabin. And I have been here ever since waiting. Waiting for what? Caleb turned to look at her. His gray eyes were old, tired, full of a grief that had never quite healed. I do not know, he said honestly. Waiting for something to matter again, I suppose. Waiting for a reason to keep living beyond just not wanting to die. Kaya reached out and placed her hand on his arm. A small gesture, a human connection. "Maybe you found it," she said softly. Caleb looked at her hand, then at her face, at the strength in her eyes that 8 years of abuse had not been able to destroy, at the courage that had allowed her to stand up to her tormentor in front of a mob. "Maybe I did," he said. That afternoon, while the sun beat down on the prairie and heat waves shimmered on the horizon, Kaya told him her own story. The full story. Everything she had kept locked away for so long. They sat in the shade of the porch, drinking water and watching the empty landscape, and she talked. Her voice was steady, flat, almost detached, as if she were describing events that had happened to someone else. But Caleb knew that tone. It was the voice of someone who had learned to separate themselves from their own pain just to survive it. "My mother's name was Ayanna," she began. "She was Apache, full blood, beautiful with long black hair and eyes that could see straight into your soul. My father was Apache too, a warrior. He died defending our village from soldiers when I was too young to remember his face." She paused, her eyes distant. "After my father died, the tribe scattered. The army had destroyed everything. There was no village to go back to, no family to take us in. My mother did what she had to do to survive. She took me to the white settlements looking for work, looking for safety. That is where she met Samuel." Kaya nodded. "He was a trader then, just starting out. He came to the settlement to buy hides and saw my mother. She was young, pretty, desperate." Her voice hardened. "He offered to marry her, promised her a home, stability, a future for me. She did not love him, but she wanted me to have a chance." "How old were you?" 4, maybe 5. I do not remember exactly. Those early years were not bad. Samuel was busy building his business. He was gone most of the time. My mother took care of the house, raised me, taught me the old ways when no one was watching. The songs, the stories, the language. Her hands tightened in her lap. Then my mother got sick. Consumption. The coughing started slow, then got worse. She was in bed for 3 months before she died. I was 12 years old. Caleb waited, sensing that the worst was yet to come. After she was gone, everything changed. I was alone with him. No protection, no witness. And Kaya swallowed hard. He started making me do more work around the house, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the animals. I did not mind that. I was used to working. But it did not stop there. No. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. The first time he hit me, I was 14. I had burned the dinner, ruined a pot of stew. He took off his belt and beat me until I could not stand. Told me it was for my own good, that I needed to learn. Caleb's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The same cold rage that had driven him to hunt down the doctor in Abilene was building in his chest. After that, the beatings became regular. Every few days, sometimes for mistakes I had made, sometimes for no reason at all. He would come home angry about something, and I was there, and I was convenient. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I learned to read his moods, learned when to hide, learned how to make myself small and quiet and invisible. And the other things? Kaya was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. That started when I was 16. He came to my room one night, said I owed him, said he had fed me and clothed me and kept a roof over my head, and it was time I repaid him properly. Caleb closed his eyes. He had suspected, had known on some level from the moment he saw the wounds on her body, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that suspicion never could. I tried to run away 3 times, Kaya continued. The first time I was 17. I made it 2 days into the desert before he found me. He beat me unconscious and locked me in the barn for a week. The second time, 18, I stole a horse, made it almost to the Mexican border before his men caught up with me. That time he tied me to a post in the yard and left me there for 2 days without food or water, told me I was nothing, that I belonged to him, that no one would ever want me. Her eyes met Caleb's, dark, haunted, but somehow impossibly still unbroken. The third time was last week. I did not have a plan. I just ran, into the prairie, into the sun, into whatever was waiting for me out there. I did not care if I died. I just wanted to be free. And he caught you. He caught me near that old oak tree, beat me worse than ever before. Then he hung me up by my ankles and said he would come back at sunset to see if I was still alive. If I was, he would take me home. If I was not, she shrugged, then at least the problem would be solved. Caleb reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the heat of the day. But you were still alive, he said. Yes. She squeezed his hand. Because you came along. Because you did not walk away. They sat there in silence, hands intertwined, two broken people who had somehow found each other in the vast emptiness of the frontier. There is something else, Kaya said finally. Something I have not told anyone. What? She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if afraid the wind might carry her words to the wrong ears. Samuel is not just a traitor. He does other things, secret things. I have seen him meeting with Judge Crane in the middle of the night, passing envelopes talking about land and money and people who owe them debts. Caleb straightened. Judge Harlan Crane, the federal judge? Yes, they have been working together for years. People who borrow money from Samuel and cannot pay it back, they disappear. Their land gets sold. Samuel and the judge split the profits. Are you saying they have been killing people? I do not have proof, but I have seen too much. I know too much. Her eyes were wide, frightened. That is why Samuel cannot let me go. It is not just about controlling me or punishing me for running away. It is about keeping me quiet. Caleb understood now, understood the desperation in Samuel's eyes when he came to the cabin, understood why he had gathered a mob so quickly, why he was willing to risk everything to get her back. She was not just a runaway stepdaughter, she was a witness, a threat, a loose end that needed to be tied off permanently. You have to tell the marshal, Caleb said. I tried, years ago. He did not believe me, said I was a troubled girl making up stories for attention. Bitterness crept into her voice. Who would believe a half-breed Apache over the richest man in the territory? Things are different now. People are starting to ask questions. The doctor believes you. Others saw the bruises. It is not enough. Kaya shook her head. Samuel has too much power. Too many people owe him. Even if they lock him up for what he did to me, he will find a way out. He always finds a way out. Caleb thought about this, thought about the web of corruption that Samuel and Judge Crane had woven over the years, thought about how deep their roots must go, how many people they had compromised, how many secrets they held. He thought about justice, real justice, not the kind that came from courtrooms and lawyers, but the kind that came from the end of a gun. And then he pushed that thought away. He had gone down that road once before. It had cost him everything. We will find another way, he said. We will expose them, all of them, and when the truth comes out, there will be nowhere for them to hide. Kaya looked at him with something like hope in her eyes. It was a fragile thing, that hope, easily crushed, but it was there. Do you really believe that? I have to, Caleb said, because the alternative is unacceptable. The next 2 days passed in something that almost resembled normalcy. With Samuel locked up in the Dusty Creek jail and Judge Crane keeping his distance, the immediate threat seemed to have receded. Doctor Wallace came by each morning to check on Kaya's wounds, pronouncing them healing well. Bill Hartley stopped by one afternoon, bringing extra ammunition and a quiet apology for not speaking up sooner. I should have said something that night, Bill said, standing awkwardly on the porch with his hat in his hands. When they were talking about stringing you up. I knew it was wrong. You were scared, Caleb finished for him. So was everyone else. That is no excuse. No, but it is human. The important thing is what you do now. Bill nodded slowly. What can I do? Keep your ears open. Let me know if you hear anything. And if trouble comes again, Caleb paused. Be ready to pick a side. After Bill left, Kaya emerged from the cabin where she had been resting. She watched the horse trader ride away, her expression thoughtful. "Do you trust him?" "I trust that he wants to do the right thing," Caleb said. "Whether he will have the courage when it matters, I do not know." Kaya came to stand beside him. Her wounds had healed enough that she could move without visible pain, though he knew she still hurt. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. "I want to help," she said. "With the work around here. I am tired of lying around feeling useless." Caleb looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, the need to feel like more than a victim. "All right," he said. "You can start with the horses." They worked together that afternoon tending to Copper, and the 2 other horses Caleb kept in the small corral behind the cabin. Kaya showed a natural affinity for the animals, speaking to them softly, in a mixture of English and Apache, her hands gentle but confident as she brushed their coats and checked their hooves. "My mother taught me," she explained when she caught Caleb watching. "The Apache have always been horsemen. It is in our blood. You have a gift." She shrugged, but he could see the pleasure in her eyes, the simple joy of doing something well. He wondered how long it had been since anyone had paid her a genuine compliment. That evening they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the mountains. The sky turned shades of orange and purple that no painter could capture the colors bleeding into each other like watercolors on wet paper. In the distance a hawk circled lazily, riding the thermal currents. "It is beautiful here," Kaya said softly. "Yes. Why did you choose this place, of all the places you could have gone?" Caleb thought about it. The truth was, he had not really chosen this place. He had simply stopped running when he ran out of reasons to keep going. "I was looking for somewhere quiet," he said finally. "Somewhere I could be alone with my thoughts. Somewhere the past could not find me." "Did it work? For a while?" He glanced at her. "Then you came along." She smiled at that. It was a small smile, barely a ghost of what a smile should be. But it was real. "I am sorry," she said, "for bringing all this trouble to your door." "Do not be. If anything, you reminded me that hiding from life is not the same as living it." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded and the stars began to emerge. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called to its pack. The sound was lonely but somehow comforting, a reminder that even in this vast emptiness, no creature was truly alone. "What will you do?" Caleb asked. "After all this is over, where will you go?" Kaya was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "My mother used to talk about Montana. She said there were small bands of Apache there, people like me who did not quite belong anywhere. She said they had made their own place in the world. Do you want to find them?" "I do not know." She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I do not know who I am, Caleb. For 8 years I was nothing but Samuel's property, his victim, his shame. I do not know who Kaya is. I do not know what she wants or what she dreams about or what makes her happy." "Then maybe that is what you need to find out." She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "How?" "By trying things, by making choices, by giving yourself permission to be someone other than what he made you." Kaya considered this. Then she said, "You are wise for a broken man." Caleb laughed. It was a rusty sound unused for too long. "I am not wise. I have just made enough mistakes to know what not to do. That is wisdom, if you say so." They sat there until the last light faded and the stars filled the sky, and for a few precious hours they allowed themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. In Dusty Creek, while Caleb and Kaya found a fragile peace, other forces were in motion. Judge Harlan Crane sat in his private study, a glass of whiskey in his hand and a problem on his mind. The problem had a name: Kaya, the Apache girl who had seen too much and lived too long. He had underestimated Samuel, had thought his partner was smart enough to keep his household in order to control one half-breed girl who should have known her place. Instead, Samuel had let his temper get the better of him, had strung her up on a tree in broad daylight where anyone could find her. And someone had. Caleb Thornton, a name Crane had heard in passing over the years but never paid much attention to. A loner. A hermit, a man who kept to himself and caused no trouble. Until now. Crane swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the amber liquid catch the lamplight. He had built his empire carefully over 2 decades. Land, money, influence, all of it acquired through patience, cunning, and the judicious application of violence when necessary. He had judges in his pocket, lawmen on his payroll, businessmen who owed him their livelihoods. He was untouchable, or so he had thought. The girl was a liability. She knew about the land deals, the disappearances, the bodies buried in unmarked graves across the territory. If she talked, if someone actually listened to her, it could all come crashing down. Samuel's solution had been crude but effective. Eliminate the girl, blame it on the stranger, and let the mob do the dirty work. It should have worked. It would have worked if not for that meddling doctor and the marshal returning at exactly the wrong moment. Now Samuel was in jail, and Crane needed to make a decision. He finished his whiskey and stood walking to the window that overlooked the main street of Dusty Creek. The town was quiet at this hour. A few lights burned in windows. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Peaceful, orderly. His town built on secrets and blood. He could not let it fall. Crane turned from the window and walked to his desk where a small leather case sat beside a stack of papers. He opened it and withdrew a derringer, a tiny weapon almost delicate in appearance, but at close range it was deadly. Samuel was a loose end now, a liability. If he went to trial, if he started talking to save his own skin, there was no telling what he might reveal. Better to cut the string before it unraveled completely. Crane pocketed the derringer and reached for his coat. It was time to pay his partner a visit. The Dusty Creek Jail was a small building near the edge of town. 2 cells, a desk for the deputy on duty, and not much else. It had been built in more optimistic times when the founders of the town believed that crime could be contained in such modest quarters. Deputy Tom Reeves was on duty that night. He was young, eager, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Judge Crane arrived just after midnight, his presence announced by the creak of the door and the soft tap of his boots on the wooden floor. "Judge Crane." Reeves stood up quickly, knocking over his coffee cup in his haste. "I was not expecting you, sir." "At ease, deputy." Crane smiled his most reassuring smile. "I need to speak with the prisoner. Official business." Reeves hesitated. Marshal Garrett said no visitors without his permission. "The marshal answers to the federal court. I am the federal court." Crane's smile did not waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Surely you understand the chain of command." The young deputy wavered. On one hand, his orders were clear. On the other hand, defying a federal judge was not something he wanted on his record. "I suppose, if it is official business." "It is, I assure you." Reeves nodded reluctantly and led the way to the cells. Samuel Redford sat on a narrow cot, his fine clothes rumpled and dirty, his face pale in the lamplight. When he saw the judge, relief flooded his features. "Harlan, thank God, I knew you would come." Crane said nothing. He simply stood there looking at his partner with an expression that Samuel could not quite read. "We need to get me out of here." Samuel continued standing and gripping the bars of his cell. "I have money hidden. We can bribe whoever we need to bribe. Pay off the marshal, the witnesses, whoever. Then we finish what we started with the girl." Still Crane said nothing. "Harlan, did you hear me?" "I heard you, Samuel." Crane's voice was calm, cold. "I heard everything you just said." Something in his tone made Samuel take a step back. "What do you mean?" Crane turned to Deputy Reeves, who was standing awkwardly near the desk, trying to pretend he was not listening. "Deputy, would you mind stepping outside for a moment, judge's privilege?" Reeves looked uncertain, but the authority in Crane's voice was impossible to resist. "Yes, sir. I will just be right outside if you need anything." He left. The door closed behind him, and then they were alone. "Harlan." Samuel's voice had changed. The relief was gone, replaced by a dawning fear. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago." Crane reached into his pocket and withdrew the derringer. "Cleaning up your mess." "Wait, wait." Samuel backed against the wall of his cell, hands raised. "We are partners. We built this together. You cannot just—" "I can do whatever I want, Samuel. That has always been the difference between us. You think you have power because you have money. But real power is being willing to do what needs to be done regardless of the cost." He raised the derringer. "Please, Harlan, please. I will do anything. I will disappear. You will never hear from me again." Crane paused. Considered. "Actually," he said slowly, "there might be a use for you yet." Hope flickered in Samuel's eyes. "Anything. Name it." "The girl. She needs to be silenced. Permanently. And the man who is protecting her. Thornton, I can do it. Give me a chance." Crane studied his partner for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered the derringer. "I am going to open this cell," he said. "You are going to slip out the back. And you are going to finish what you started. No more mobs. No more public spectacles. Just you and whatever men you can gather and a quiet solution to a noisy problem." Samuel nodded eagerly. "Yes, yes, I can do that." "And Samuel—" Crane leaned close to the bars, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If you fail again, do not bother running. There is nowhere on this earth you can hide from me." He unlocked the cell. Samuel stepped out, rubbing his wrists where the manacles had chafed. "What about the deputy?" "Leave him to me." Samuel slipped out the back door into the night. A moment later, Crane heard the sound of hooves as his former partner fled into the darkness. Crane pocketed the derringer and walked to the front door. He opened it and stepped outside where Deputy Reeves was waiting. "All finished, sir." "Yes, thank you for your patience." "Is everything all right?" "The prisoner." "The prisoner is resting. Do not disturb him until morning." Reeves nodded, though something in his expression suggested he was not entirely convinced. It did not matter. By morning, Samuel would be miles away, and by the time anyone realized what had happened, it would be too late. Crane walked back toward his house, the night air cool on his face. He had set events in motion. Now all he had to do was wait. The news reached Caleb the next morning, delivered by a rider who had pushed his horse hard through the night. He was sitting on the porch drinking coffee and watching the sunrise when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. At first he thought it might be Dr. Wallace coming for his daily visit. But as the rider drew closer, he saw that it was a young man he did not recognize, mounted on a lathered horse that looked ready to collapse. The rider pulled up at the fence, breathing hard. "Are you Caleb Thornton?" "I am." "I have a message from the marshal." The young man reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded paper. "Samuel Redford escaped from jail last night. The marshal wanted you to know." Caleb felt the words like a punch to the gut. He took the paper, unfolded it, and read the marshal's hurried handwriting. "Samuel escaped sometime before dawn. Deputy found unconscious. No sign of accomplices. Assume he is armed and dangerous. Watch yourself." Kaya appeared in the doorway behind him. She had heard the hoofbeats, seen the rider approaching. Now she saw the look on Caleb's face. "What is it?" she asked, though some part of her already knew. "Samuel escaped," Caleb said, "last night." The color drained from her face. For a moment she stood frozen, her hand gripping the doorframe so tightly that her knuckles went white. "He is coming," she whispered. "He is coming for me." "He will try." "You do not understand." Her voice rose, panic creeping in at the edges. "He will not stop. He will never stop. He will hunt me for the rest of my life. Even if I run, even if I hide, he will find me. He always finds me." Caleb stood and walked to her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "He is one man, probably traveling alone, probably without supplies. The marshal will have people looking for him. He cannot hide forever. You do not know him like I do." "No, but I know men like him. They are dangerous when they have power, when they have people to do their dirty work. But alone, hunted, desperate." Caleb shook his head. "That is when they make mistakes." Kaya looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face for reassurance, for hope, for something to hold on to. "What do we do?" she asked. "We prepare. We fortify this cabin. We make sure that when he comes, and he will come, we are ready for him." He turned to the messenger who was still waiting by the fence. "Ride back to town. Tell the marshal what I said. Then find Bill Hartley and Dr. Wallace. Tell them I need to see them. Today." The young man nodded and kicked his horse into motion, racing back toward Dusty Creek. Caleb watched him go, then turned back to Kaya. "We have maybe a day," he said. "Maybe less. Samuel will need to gather men, get weapons, make a plan, but he will not wait long. His pride will not let him." "A day." Kaya's voice was hollow. "That is not much time." "It is enough." Caleb took her hand. "I survived 10 years on this frontier alone. I know how to defend a position, and this time I have something worth defending." She looked at him, and despite the fear, despite the desperation, something like warmth flickered in her eyes. "You really believe we can survive this?" "I believe that I am not going to let him take you, whatever it costs." And he meant it. Every word. The next several hours were a blur of activity. Caleb moved with a purpose he had not felt in years, the old instincts coming back like muscle memory. He had been a lawman once. He knew how to prepare for a siege. First, he reinforced the cabin's defenses. The windows were small and set high in the walls, good for shooting from, but difficult to shoot into. He piled sandbags beneath them, creating protected positions. He nailed boards across the back door, leaving only the front entrance accessible. He dug a shallow trench behind the cabin, a fallback position in case they were overrun. Kaya worked alongside him, following his instructions without complaint. She hauled sandbags, loaded rifles, stacked ammunition. Her wounds still pained her. He could see it in the way she moved, but she did not stop, did not slow down. The fear had transformed into something else, something harder, something that looked almost like anger. Bill Hartley arrived in the early afternoon, bringing a wagon loaded with supplies, extra rifles, boxes of ammunition, food and water to last a week. "The marshal is organizing a search party," Bill reported as they unloaded the wagon. "But it will take time to gather men. Most folks are scared. Samuel still has friends in town, people who owe him money or favors. They do not want to get involved. How many can we count on?" "For certain, maybe 5 or 6. Dr. Wallace for sure. A few of the younger men who do not have ties to Samuel." Bill shook his head. "It is not much. It is enough." "Doctor." Wallace arrived as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. He brought his medical bag and a grim expression. "I examined the deputy this morning," he said. "Someone hit him from behind, hard. He has a concussion, maybe a fractured skull. He does not remember anything after the judge arrived." Caleb and Bill exchanged glances. "The judge?" Caleb asked. "Judge Crane. Apparently he came to the jail last night, said he needed to speak with the prisoner. That is the last thing Deputy Reeves remembers." The pieces clicked into place. Samuel's escape had not been an accident. It had been arranged, and the man who arranged it was still out there, still pulling strings. "This goes deeper than we thought," Caleb said. "What do you mean?" "Kaya told me about Samuel and the judge, their arrangement, the land deals, the disappearances." He met the doctor's eyes. "She knows things that could bring them both down. That is why Samuel cannot let her live. And that is why the judge let him escape." Dr. Wallace absorbed this information, his weathered face growing even more grave. "If that is true, we are not just fighting one desperate man. We are fighting the entire power structure of this territory. Then we had better be ready." As darkness fell, they gathered in the cabin for what might be their last night of peace. Caleb, Kaya, Bill Hartley, and Dr. Wallace sat around the small table sharing a meal of beans and cornbread. Outside, the prairie was silent, watchful, waiting. "How long do you think we have?" Bill asked. "Samuel will move fast," Caleb replied. "He cannot afford to wait. Every hour that passes gives the marshal more time to find him. My guess is he will come tonight or tomorrow night at the latest." "How many men will he have?" "That depends on how much money he has access to and how quickly he can gather them. 10 maybe, 15 if he is desperate. And we have 4. We have surprise on our side. He does not know that we know he escaped. He will expect to find me alone or maybe with Kaya. He will not expect a defense." Dr. Wallace spoke up. "I am no fighter, Caleb, I have not fired a gun in 20 years. You do not need to be a fighter. I need you to stay with Kaya. Keep her safe, patch up anyone who gets hurt. Can you do that?" The old doctor nodded slowly. "Yes, that I can do." Caleb turned to Bill. "And you? Can I count on you when it matters?" Bill met his eyes. There was fear there. Caleb could see it. But there was something else, too. Something that looked like resolve. "I spent my whole life taking the easy path," Bill said, "looking the other way when things got uncomfortable. It is time I stood for something. Even if it costs you, especially then." Caleb nodded. It would have to be enough. After the meal, they took turns keeping watch while the others tried to sleep. Caleb took the first shift sitting on the porch with his rifle across his knees, staring out into the darkness. Kaya came to join him around midnight. "You should be resting," he said. "I cannot sleep." She sat down beside him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Every time I close my eyes, I see his face, hear his voice, feel his hands on me." Caleb said nothing. There were no words that could erase that kind of pain. "Can I ask you something?" Kaya said after a long silence. "Anything. If we survive this, what happens next?" Caleb considered the question. It was something he had avoided thinking about. The immediate crisis had consumed all his attention, leaving no room for the future. "I do not know," he admitted. "I suppose that depends on what you want." "What do you want?" He thought about his cabin, his quiet life, the years he had spent hiding from the world, waiting for nothing. "I used to think I wanted to be left alone," he said. "That was why I came here, to escape from everyone and everything. But now," he looked at her, "now I think maybe I was just afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of caring about something again, of having something to lose." He reached out and took her hand. "You reminded me what it feels like to matter, to have a purpose. I had forgotten." Kaya squeezed his hand. "You matter to me," she said softly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that." They sat there in the darkness, hand in hand, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. And for a few precious hours, the fear receded, replaced by something warmer. Something that felt almost like peace. But the peace would not last. Somewhere out there in the night, Samuel Redford was gathering his forces. And soon, very soon, he would come for what he believed was his. The fifth night arrived like a held breath finally released. Caleb had spent the day making final preparations, checking and rechecking the rifles, positioning sandbags, running through scenarios in his mind, planning for every possibility he could imagine and a few he could not. The work kept his hands busy and his thoughts focused, which was exactly what he needed. Kaya worked alongside him without complaint. Her wounds had healed enough that she could move freely now, though he caught her wincing occasionally when she thought he was not looking. She had insisted on learning to shoot properly, and he had spent an hour that morning teaching her the finer points of handling the Colt Point .45 he had given her. She was a quick study. Her hands were steady. Her aim was true. But shooting at targets was not the same as shooting at a man. He hoped she would not have to learn that lesson tonight. Bill Hartley arrived in the late afternoon with news from town. The marshal's search party had found signs of Samuel's trail heading north away from the cabin, but the tracks had disappeared into rocky terrain. Either Samuel had escaped the territory entirely, or he was doubling back using paths that left no trace. "Most folks think he ran," Bill said, "headed for Mexico maybe, or California, somewhere he can start over." "He did not run," Caleb replied. "He is out there, waiting." "How can you be sure?" "Because men like Samuel do not run. Their pride will not let them. He will come back to prove that he is still in control, that no one can defy him and live." Bill nodded slowly, his face grim. "Then we had better be ready." Dr. Wallace arrived as the sun began to set, his medical bag packed with bandages and instruments. He looked older in the fading light, the lines on his face deeper, the shadows under his eyes darker. But his hands were steady and his voice was calm. "Whatever happens tonight," he said, I want you to know that I do not regret standing with you. It has been a long time since I did something that mattered." They ate a simple meal as darkness fell. Beans and cornbread the same as the night before. No one spoke much. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said. After dinner they took their positions. Caleb stationed himself at the front window, his rifle resting on the sandbags, his eyes scanning the moonless dark. Bill took the side window covering the approach from the east. Dr. Wallace stayed with Kaya near the back of the cabin, ready to provide aid if anyone was wounded. And then they waited. The torches appeared just before midnight. Caleb saw them, first flickering points of orange light emerging from the darkness like the eyes of predators. He counted them silently. 10, 11, 12. More than he had hoped for. Fewer than he had feared. "They are here," he said quietly. Bill moved to his position, his rifle already raised. Kaya came to stand near Caleb, the pistol in her hand, her face pale but determined. "Stay back," Caleb told her. "Let us handle the first wave." "No," her voice was firm. "This is my fight. I will not hide while others bleed for me." He wanted to argue, but there was no time. The torches were drawing closer, spreading out into a half circle around the cabin. In the flickering light he could make out the shapes of men on horseback, their weapons glinting. And at the front of the pack, mounted on a black horse that seemed to absorb the torchlight rather than reflect, it was Samuel Redford. He looked different from the last time Caleb had seen him. The fine clothes were gone, replaced by rough traveling gear stained with dust and sweat. His beard had grown out patchy and unkempt, but his eyes were the same, cold, gray, burning with a hatred that 10 years of abuse had not satisfied. Samuel raised his hand and the riders stopped. "Thornton." His voice carried across the distance, sharp and commanding. "You have something that belongs to me." Caleb said nothing. He simply weighted his finger, resting lightly on the trigger of his rifle. "I am going to give you one chance," Samuel continued. "One chance to walk away from this alive. Hand over the girl and I will let you ride out of here. You have my word." "Your word." Caleb let the contempt drip from his voice. "The word of a man who beats women and hangs them from trees. The word of a man who murders debtors and steals their land. Forgive me if I do not find that reassuring." Samuel's face twisted with rage. "You know nothing about me." "I know enough." For a moment silence hung between them, thick and heavy as the darkness itself. Then Samuel laughed. It was a cold sound, devoid of any real humor. "You think you can stop me? You, an old man hiding in a cabin? I have a dozen armed riders behind me. What do you have?" "The truth." "The truth." Samuel spat the word like a curse. "The truth is whatever I say it is. The truth is that this territory belongs to me. The law belongs to me. The people belong to me." He gestured to the riders behind him. "These men know that. They know that standing with me means prosperity and standing against me means death. Then let them make their choice." Caleb raised his voice, projecting it over Samuel's head to the men gathered in the darkness. "Listen to me, all of you. I know some of you. I have bought supplies from your stores, horses from your ranches. I have never caused you any trouble, never given you any reason to want me dead." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But here you are, ready to kill me on the word of a man who beats his stepdaughter bloody and leaves her hanging from a tree to die. A man who has been stealing land from your neighbors for years, working with Judge Crane to make people disappear when they cannot pay their debts." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Uncertainty flickered in the torchlight. "You do not have to do this," Caleb continued. "You can turn around and ride away. Go home to your families. Tell your children that when you had to choose between what was easy and what was right, you chose right." "Enough." Samuel's voice cracked like a whip. "Do not listen to him. He is a liar and a violator of women. He took my stepdaughter against her will and has been holding her captive for days." "That is not true." The voice came from behind Caleb, from the cabin doorway. Kaya stepped out onto the porch, moving into the torchlight where everyone could see her. She wore a simple dress, Her long black hair unbound, her dark eyes blazing with a fire that Caleb had never seen before. "He did not take me," she said, her voice carrying clear and strong across the night. "He saved me. He cut me down from the tree where this man hung me. He tended my wounds and gave me shelter. He has treated me with more kindness in 5 days than Samuel Redford showed me in 8 years. Samuel's face contorted with fury. "You lying little—" "I am not lying." Kaya stepped forward, standing at the edge of the porch. "I have spent 8 years being silent, being afraid, letting him control me with fear and pain. No more." She turned to face the gathered men. Her chin raised, her voice unwavering. "Some of you have seen the bruises on me, the marks he left. You saw and you said nothing because it was easier to look away. I do not blame you for that. I was weak too for a long time, but I am not weak anymore." She pointed at Samuel. "This man is a monster. He has beaten me, violated me, and tried to kill me. And if you help him tonight, if you do what he wants, then you are monsters too. You will have to live with that for the rest of your lives." Silence. Complete and absolute silence, broken only by the crackle of torches and the nervous stamping of horses. Then slowly, one of the riders turned his horse away from the cabin. "I did not sign up for this," he muttered. "You told us he was a criminal, that the girl was lying. You did not tell us—" "Get back in line," Samuel snarled, but the man kept riding, and then another followed, and another. Within minutes, half of Samuel's force had melted away into the darkness, leaving only 5 or 6 riders who were either too loyal or too afraid to abandon their employer. Samuel's face had gone pale with rage. His hands shook as he gripped the reins of his horse. "Fine," he spat. "Fine. If none of you have the stomach for this, I will do it myself." He raised his pistol and aimed it at Kaya. The shot never came. From the darkness behind Samuel's remaining men, a voice rang out like the crack of doom. "That is enough, Samuel." Marshal Thomas Garrett rode into the torchlight, flanked by 5 armed deputies. Their weapons were drawn, their faces set with grim determination. "You are under arrest," the marshal continued, "for escaping custody and attempted murder." Samuel spun his horse around, his eyes wild. "You have no authority here, Garrett. This is private land, private business." "Murder is never private business." The marshal's gaze swept over the remaining riders. "And neither is conspiracy, which brings me to you, Judge Crane." For the first time, Caleb noticed the older man sitting on a horse at the edge of Samuel's group. He had been so focused on Samuel that he had not registered the judge's presence. But there he was, his face pale in the torchlight, his eyes darting between the marshal and the darkness beyond. "I do not know what you are talking about," Crane said, his voice steady, despite the fear that flickered in his eyes. "We found Deputy Reeves's statement," the marshal replied. "He remembered more than you thought. Remembered you coming to the jail, remembered you talking to Samuel, remembered hearing the cell door open before someone hit him from behind." Crane's composure cracked. "That is a lie. The boy is confused. He does not know what he saw." "Maybe. But we also found the bodies." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. 3 of them, the marshal continued, buried in shallow graves on the Peterson property, the same property that Judge Crane somehow acquired for a fraction of its value after the Petersons disappeared 2 years ago. "That proves nothing." "It proves enough." The marshal raised his pistol. "Harlan Crane, you are under arrest for assault, attempted murder, and inciting a mob. Samuel Redford, you are under arrest for escaping custody and attempted murder. Throw down your weapons, now." For a long moment, no one moved. The torches flickered. The horses stamped. The night held its breath. Then Samuel laughed. It was a wild sound, unhinged, the laugh of a man who had lost everything and no longer cared about the consequences. "You think this is over?" He raised his pistol, aiming at the marshal. "You think you can just ride in here and take everything I have built? I made this territory. I own it. I own all of you." He fired. The shot went wide, missing the marshal by inches, and then everything exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Caleb dropped behind the sandbags, returning fire at Samuel's men. Bill Hartley shot from the side window, his rifle cracking in steady rhythm. The marshal and his deputies charged forward, their horses screaming as bullets tore through the air around them. One of Samuel's men fell from his horse, clutching his chest. Another wheeled and fled into the darkness, abandoning his employer to save his own skin. The remaining riders scattered, caught between the cabin's defenders and the marshal's assault. In the chaos, Samuel spurred his horse toward the cabin. His face was twisted with madness, his pistol raised, his eyes fixed on one target and one target only: Kaya. Caleb saw him coming and tried to bring his rifle around, but he was too slow. Samuel's horse thundered past his position, and then the man was leaping from the saddle, crashing through the cabin door, disappearing inside. Kaya! Caleb scrambled to his feet and ran. He burst through the door to find Samuel standing in the middle of the cabin, his pistol aimed at Kaya's head. She had backed against the far wall, her own pistol raised, but her hand was shaking now. The confidence she had shown on the porch had evaporated in the face of her abuser, replaced by the old familiar terror. "Put it down," Samuel said, his voice deadly calm despite the madness in his eyes. "Put it down, or I swear I will paint these walls with your brains." "Samuel." Caleb raised his hands, showing they were empty. He had dropped his rifle in his rush to get inside. "It is over. The marshal has your men. Crane is finished. There is nowhere left to run." "I am not running." Samuel did not take his eyes off Kaya. "I am finishing what I started. This little bitch has caused me more trouble than she is worth. It is time she learned her final lesson. If you kill her, you will hang. The marshal saw you come in here. There will be no talking your way out of this one." "Then I will hang." Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger. "But at least I will have the satisfaction of knowing she died first." Kaya spoke then. Her voice was small, trembling, but there was something in it that made Samuel pause. "Do you remember what you told me?" she asked. "The first time you hit me." Samuel frowned. "What?" "You said I needed to learn my place, that I was nothing without you, that no one would ever want me, ever love me, ever see me as anything but a half-breed animal." She straightened slightly, her shoulders squaring despite the gun pointed at her face. "I believed you. For 8 years I believed every word. I thought I was worthless. I thought I deserved everything you did to me. I thought I would die in that house alone and forgotten, and no one would mourn." Her dark eyes met Samuel's gray ones. "But I was wrong. Someone did see me. Someone did care. And tonight I learned something that 8 years of your abuse could never teach me." "And what is that?" Samuel sneered. "That I am not nothing." Kaya's voice hardened. "That I never was. That everything you told me was a lie, because the truth is that you are the one who is nothing. A sad, pathetic, broken man who could only feel powerful by hurting someone smaller than himself." Samuel's face contorted with rage. "Shut up. You can kill me if you want, but it will not change anything. It will not make you strong. It will not make you matter. You will still be the same worthless piece of garbage you have always been, and everyone will know it. I said shut up." He pulled the trigger. The hammer clicked on an empty chamber. In his rage and his haste, Samuel had fired all his bullets during the chaos outside. His pistol was empty. For a moment he stared at the weapon in disbelief. Then his eyes snapped back to Kaya, and he lunged at her with a roar of fury. But Kaya was faster. She raised her own pistol, the one Caleb had given her, and fired. The bullet caught Samuel in the chest, punching through his heart and out his back. He staggered, his eyes wide with shock, his hands grasping at the wound as if he could somehow hold his life inside his body. He looked at Kaya, at the gun in her hand, at the girl he had tormented for 8 years now, standing tall and unafraid. "You," he whispered. And then he fell. He hit the floor hard, his body convulsing once, twice, then going still. Blood pooled beneath him, spreading across the wooden planks like a dark tide. Kaya stood frozen, the pistol still raised, smoke curling from its barrel. Her eyes were fixed on Samuel's body, but she was not really seeing it. She was somewhere else, somewhere far away, processing what she had just done. Caleb moved to her slowly, gently taking the pistol from her hand. "It is over," he said softly. "He cannot hurt you anymore." Kaya blinked. Her eyes focused on Caleb's face, and he saw the tears beginning to form. Not tears of grief, tears of release, of 8 years of fear and pain finally coming to an end. "I killed him," she whispered. "You defended yourself. There is a difference." "Is there?" Caleb looked at the body on the floor, at the man who had caused so much suffering, who had destroyed so many lives now lying in a pool of his own blood. "Yes," he said, "there is." Outside, the gunfire had stopped. The marshal's voice rang out calling for surrender. One by one, Samuel's remaining men threw down their weapons and raised their hands. The battle was over, and somewhere in the darkness, a new day was beginning to dawn. The sun rose over a changed world. Caleb sat on the porch of his cabin, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching the light spread across the prairie. His shoulder throbbed where a bullet had grazed him during the fight, but Dr. Wallace had bandaged it well. It would heal. Everything healed given enough time. The marshal had taken Samuel's body away along with Judge Crane and the surviving members of the conspiracy. There would be trials, investigations, newspaper reporters from Santa Fe and beyond. The corruption that had festered in Dusty Creek for years was being exposed to the light, and like all infections, it would need to be cut out before the body could heal. Bill Hartley had ridden back to town with the marshal, promising to return later with news. Dr. Wallace had stayed behind ostensibly to monitor Caleb's wound, but really because he did not want to leave until he knew that Kaya was all right. She was inside now sleeping. The first real sleep she had managed in days. The terror that had haunted her dreams had finally lost its power. Samuel Redford was dead. He would never touch her again. Caleb sipped his coffee and thought about what came next. For 10 years he had lived in this cabin like a ghost, going through the motions of existence without really living, hiding from the world, hiding from himself, waiting for something though he had never known what. Now he knew. He had been waiting for a reason to matter again, a purpose, something to live for beyond the next sunrise and the next sunset. He had found it in the most unlikely of places, in a half-dead girl hanging from a tree, in a fight that was not his own, in the simple act of choosing to do the right thing when the easy thing was to walk away. The cabin door opened behind him. Kaya emerged wrapped in a blanket, her dark hair mussed from sleep. She sat down on the step beside him close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You should be resting," he said. "I slept enough." She gazed out at the horizon where the sun was now fully risen, painting the prairie in shades of gold and green. "It is beautiful here." "Yes. I never noticed before. How beautiful it is, I mean. I was always too scared to see anything except the danger. Fear does that, narrows your vision until all you can see is what might hurt you." Kaya nodded slowly. "I do not want to live like that anymore. I want to see the beauty. I want to feel the sun on my face without flinching. I want to be free." "You are free." "Am I?" She turned to look at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "Sometimes I still feel the chains, even though he is gone." "That will take time. The body heals faster than the spirit. But you are stronger than you know, Kaya. You proved that last night." She was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. Then she said, "What happens now? Now?" Caleb took a sip of his coffee. "Now you decide what you want to do with the rest of your life. For the first time ever, that choice belongs to you." "What about you? What about me? Will you stay here in this cabin alone like you were before?" Caleb thought about the question, thought about the empty rooms, the silent nights, the slow march of days that had blurred together for so long that he had lost track of time entirely. "I do not know," he admitted. "I spent 10 years hiding from the world. I thought that was what I wanted. But now—" He shook his head. "Now I am not so sure." "You could come with me." He looked at her surprised. "Come with you where?" "Montana. My mother used to talk about it. The Apache bands there, the people who did not quite fit anywhere else. Kaya's voice was soft, tentative, as if she were afraid of asking too much. You could start over. We both could. Caleb considered the offer. A new place, a new beginning, a chance to leave behind the ghosts that had haunted him for so long. But he shook his head. I cannot, he said gently. This is my home. For better or worse, I have roots here. But you— He reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder. You need to find your own path, your own place in the world, and you need to do it without me. Why? Because as long as you are with me, you will always be the girl I saved, the victim I protected. You will never know who Kaya really is, what she is capable of, what she can become. He met her eyes. You deserve to find that out, to become the person you were always meant to be. Kaya stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. You are a wise man, Caleb Thornton. No, I am just a man who has made a lot of mistakes and learned a few things along the way. A week passed. The world did not end. The sun rose and set. The prairie went about its ancient business of wind and grass and endless sky. And slowly, gradually, life began to return to something like normal. Marshal Garrett came by twice to take statements and provide updates on the investigation. Judge Crane had cracked under questioning, revealing the full extent of his partnership with Samuel. For years, the two of them had been running a scheme to acquire land through fraud, intimidation, and murder. At least a dozen people had disappeared after failing to repay debts to Samuel's trading post. Their bodies were being found in shallow graves across the territory. The news spread like wildfire. Newspapers from Santa Fe to Denver picked up the story. The Dusty Creek Conspiracy, they were calling it. A tale of greed and corruption in the wild frontier. Caleb's name appeared in some of the articles. The lone rancher who stood against injustice. The man who saved the Apache girl. He did not read them. Fame had never interested him, and he had no desire to become a symbol for other people's agendas. Bill Hartley visited often, bringing supplies and news from town. The people of Dusty Creek were grappling with the revelations about Samuel and the judge. Many of them had been complicit to one degree or another. They had seen the bruises on Kaya. They had heard the rumors about the disappearances. They had looked the other way because it was easier than asking uncomfortable questions. Now they were being forced to confront their own culpability. Some handled it with grace, acknowledging their failures and vowing to do better. Others retreated into denial, insisting they had known nothing suspected, nothing done, nothing wrong. Caleb did not judge them. He understood how easy it was to convince yourself that evil was someone else's problem. He had done it himself for 10 long years. Dr. Wallace continued to visit every few days, ostensibly to check on their wounds, but really to share meals and conversation. The old doctor had found a new lease on life since the night of the battle. For the first time in years, he felt like he had done something that mattered, something that made a difference. I spent my whole career patching up bodies, he told Caleb one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, setting bones, stitching cuts, treating fevers. But I never really healed anyone, not where it counted. What do you mean? I mean I saw the damage that men like Samuel did, the broken women, the battered children. I treated their wounds and sent them home to be wounded again. I told myself it was not my place to interfere, that I was just a doctor, not a lawman or a preacher. He shook his head. I was a coward. You stood with us when it mattered, Caleb said. That took courage. Maybe. But it took too long for me to find it. Kaya healed quickly, both in body and spirit. The bruises faded, the cuts closed. The haunted look in her eyes began to soften, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. She spent her days helping around the cabin, learning skills she had never been taught. How to cook a proper meal, how to mend a fence, how to care for horses and cattle. Simple things, but important ones. The building blocks of a self-sufficient life. In the evenings, she sat with Caleb on the porch and talked about her mother, about the old Apache ways, about the future she was beginning to imagine for herself. I think I am going to do it, she said one night about 10 days after the battle. Go to Montana, I mean. Caleb nodded. He had known this was coming, had been preparing himself for it. When? Soon. A few more days, maybe, once I am strong enough for the journey. Do you have a plan? Not really. She smiled a small but genuine expression that transformed her face. But that is all right. Plans never worked out for me anyway. Maybe it is time to try something different. You will do well, Caleb said. Whatever you decide, wherever you end up, you have more strength in you than you know. You really believe that? I saw you face down the man who tormented you for 8 years. I saw you stand in front of a mob and tell the truth when the easy thing would have been to stay silent. I saw you pull the trigger when it was him or you. He met her eyes. Yes, Kaya, I believe it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned over and rested her head on his shoulder. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. You do not owe me thanks. Yes, I do, and not just for saving my life. She lifted her head and looked at him. You showed me that good men still exist, that kindness is not always a trick, that it is possible to trust someone without being betrayed. Caleb did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Just sat there with her in the gathering darkness, watching the stars emerge one by one, feeling something he had not felt in 10 long years. Peace. She left on a bright morning in late summer when the air was crisp and clean and the sky was the deep blue of polished turquoise. Caleb had given her supplies for the journey. Food, water, blankets, a small pouch of coins that she had tried to refuse, but he had insisted she take. He had also given her one of his horses, a sturdy mare named Dusty, who was steady on mountain trails and did not spook easily. They stood in front of the cabin facing each other in the early light. Kaya wore traveling clothes, now practical garments, suited for a long ride. Her hair was braided, her face clear and calm. She looked like a different person from the broken girl he had cut down from that tree 2 weeks ago. You have everything you need? Caleb asked. I think so. Water skins full? Yes. Ammunition? Yes. The map I drew? Kaya laughed. It was a wonderful sound, free and unforced. Yes, Caleb, I have the map. And the food and the blankets and the coins and everything else. You have asked me 3 times already. Sorry, old habits. It is all right. It is nice to have someone worry about me. They stood in silence for a moment. The morning birds were singing. A gentle breeze stirred the grass. I will write, Kaya said, when I find somewhere to settle, so you know I made it safely. I would like that. And maybe someday, when I have figured out who I am and what I want, I will come back to visit. I would like that too. She stepped forward and embraced him, a quick, fierce hug that caught him off guard. Her arms were surprisingly strong, her grip sure. Thank you, she whispered against his chest, for not walking away. He held her for a moment, this girl who had come into his life like a storm and left it changed forever. Then he let go. Take care of yourself, Kaya. You too, Caleb Thornton. She mounted Dusty, settling into the saddle with an ease that spoke of natural horsemanship. She gathered the reins, looked down at him one last time. If you had not stopped that night, she said, I would have died on that tree. Caleb shook his head. If I had walked away that night, I would have died too, just more slowly. She smiled at that, a real smile, warm and full of life. Then she turned her horse toward the north and began to ride. Caleb watched her go, a small figure growing smaller against the vast backdrop of the prairie. She did not look back. She did not need to. When she finally disappeared over the horizon, Caleb went back inside his cabin. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. For a long time he simply sat there thinking. About Margaret and Daniel dead these 10 years. About the man he had been and the man he had become. About the girl who had ridden out of his life toward a future of her own making. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph he always carried. Margaret's face smiled up at him, frozen forever in that single captured moment. Daniel sat on her lap, his small hand reaching toward the camera, his eyes bright with curiosity. "I think I am going to be all right," Caleb said to them. "I think I finally found what I was looking for." He set the photograph on the table propped against his coffee cup where he could see it. Then he stood and walked to the window. The prairie stretched out before him, endless and ancient. Somewhere out there, Kaya was riding toward her new life. Somewhere out there, the world was continuing to turn, carrying all its beauty and cruelty along with it. And here in this small cabin on the edge of nowhere, Caleb Thornton stood at the window and watched the sun climb higher into the sky. For the first time in 10 years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. 1 year later. Caleb sat on his porch reading a letter by the light of the setting sun. The paper was worn and creased, evidence of a long journey through the postal system, but the handwriting was clear and strong. Caleb Thornton. The letter began, "I hope this finds you well. I have been in Montana for 6 months now, and I wanted to write to tell you that I found what I was looking for. There is a small band of Apache here in the mountains near Helena. They are not like the tribes my mother described. They are a mixed group, people from different bands and different backgrounds brought together by circumstance and choice. Some are full-blood Apache. Some, like me, are mixed. Some are not Apache at all, but have found a home here anyway. They welcomed me, not because of my blood or my history, but because I was willing to work and willing to learn. I have been studying the old ways, the language and the songs that my mother taught me when I was young. It feels like coming home to a place I have never been. I think about you often, about those days at your cabin, about the night you cut me down from that tree and everything that came after. Sometimes it feels like a dream, like something that happened to someone else. But then I look at the scars on my body and I remember that it was real. You told me once that doing the right thing is what helps us stand when everything else falls. I have thought about those words many times since I left. I have tried to live by them. Life is not easy here. The winters are hard, and there is always more work than hands to do it. But for the first time in my life, I feel free. I feel like I belong somewhere. I feel like I matter. I do not know if I will ever see you again. Montana is far from New Mexico, and the road between is long and dangerous. But I want you to know that I think of you as a father, the father I never had. The man who showed me that good still exists in this world, even in the darkest places. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for showing me that I was worth saving." Your friend Kaya Caleb folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket next to the photograph of Margaret and Daniel. He would add it to the small collection of letters he had received over the past year, each one a gift, each one a reminder that what he had done mattered. He looked out at the sunset, watching the colors bleed across the sky. The prairie was quiet, peaceful, the kind of peace that comes after a storm has passed and the world has been washed clean. Sometimes doing what is right costs you everything, he thought, but sometimes it gives you something back, something you did not even know you were missing. He thought about the night he had found Kaya, about the choice he had made to stop, to help, to stand against the darkness, even when the easier path was to turn away. He thought about all the nights since then, all the mornings, all the small moments that had slowly rebuilt his broken life. He thought about Margaret, about Daniel, about the grief that had consumed him for so long. It was still there, that grief. It always would be. But it no longer defined him, no longer controlled him. He had found a way to carry it without being crushed by its weight. And in the end, perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Not that pain goes away, because it never truly does, but that we can learn to live with it, to grow around it, to find meaning and purpose even in the shadow of loss. The sun touched the horizon. The sky turned from gold to orange to a deep velvety purple. Stars began to emerge one by one, like candles being lit in a dark room. Caleb Thornton sat on his porch and watched the night come on. He was 48 years old. He had lost everything he loved. He had spent 10 years hiding from the world, waiting for death to find him. But he was still here, still breathing, still standing, and for the first time in a very long time that felt like enough. This story you have heard contains elements of fiction imagined and crafted to bring a piece of the old Wild West to life. It is not about historical accuracy, though the setting is real enough. It is about something simpler and more enduring. It is about choices. Every day we face them. The choice to act or to look away. The choice to speak up or to stay silent. The choice to do what is easy or what is right. Most of the time, these choices seem small, insignificant, easy to ignore. But they are not. Every choice we make shapes who we are. Every decision, every action, every moment of courage or cowardice leaves its mark on our souls. We become the sum of our choices, for better or worse. Caleb Thornton was an ordinary man who made an extraordinary choice. He did not set out to be a hero. He did not ask for trouble or seek glory. He simply saw someone who needed help and decided not to look away. That decision cost him everything he had built: his quiet life, his safety, his anonymity. It nearly cost him his life. And in the end, it gave him back something he had lost long ago: a reason to live, a purpose, a connection to the world that he had spent 10 years trying to escape. Perhaps there is a lesson in that. Perhaps it is this, that we cannot truly live by hiding from life. That safety purchased at the price of our integrity is not safety at all, but a different kind of prison. That sometimes the most dangerous thing we can do is nothing. Let me ask you something as we come to the end of this tale. What would you have done? If you had been riding down that trail and seen a girl hanging from a tree, would you have stopped? Would you have risked everything to help a stranger? Or would you have convinced yourself that it was none of your business, that someone else would handle it? That the smart thing was to keep riding? There is no wrong answer. We are all human. We all have limits. We all have reasons for the choices we make. But consider this: in the end, when all is said and done, we do not regret the things we did nearly as much as the things we failed to do, the chances we did not take, the kindnesses we withheld, the moments when we could have made a difference but chose not to. If this story has meant something to you, I am glad. If it has made you think even for a moment about the choices you face in your own life, then it has done its work. And if you have enjoyed this tale of the Old West, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Like the video if it touched you. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this one. Leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from. What time is it where you are? I would love to know who is out there sharing this journey with me. Because in the end, stories are how we connect, how we share our humanity across the distances of time and space and experience, how we remind each other that we are not alone in this vast and sometimes frightening world. One honest choice can change everything. It can turn a man waiting to die into a man ready to live. It can transform a victim into a survivor. It can take a story that was heading toward tragedy and give it hope. And it is never too late. No matter how far we have fallen, no matter how long we have been hiding, no matter how many times we have failed, there is always another choice waiting. Another chance to do the right thing. Another opportunity to become the person we were meant to be. That is the gift of being human, the gift of free will, the gift of tomorrow. Use it wisely. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening.